We're going to go a little bit deeper with these running backs all the way down to 20, but starting off at 1 with Christian McCaffrey. This is a running back that arguably has a higher ceiling than anybody else in fantasy football. Going back to what you saw in 2019 with Christian McCaffrey, he saw almost a 75% market share with the rushing attempts in Carolina, and he saw a 22% team target share. This makes Christian McCaffrey one of the best receiving options in the NFL, plus he gets a running back workload between the tackles at the same time. It's a cheat code. That year, he was the running back 1 by a country mile with 150 total yards per game. And he won us $100,000 in the Big Dog Underdog tournament a year ago, demonstrating that he still does have that elite level ceiling. But I would be lying to you if I said Christian McCaffrey was as much of a can't miss as he was back then, right? Because CMC now does have a few red flags. 1, Christian McCaffrey was drafted back in 2017, so now he's going to be going into year 6 of his NFL career. 2, with Christian McCaffrey, you are seeing a committee type approach with this Kyle Shanahan offense when Elijah Mitchell is healthy. You actually saw Elijah Mitchell eat into that Christian McCaffrey workload this past year. The 4 games Elijah Mitchell played with CMC only averaged about 10.5 rushing attempts per game. Now, those 13 games Christian McCaffrey played with no Elijah Mitchell, he was there at 15.5 per game. And if we go over and look at the underdog player props right now, hell, they have Elijah Mitchell at about 600 rushing yards. And in comparison, they have Christian McCaffrey still at a higher mark, but only at 865. So they're kind of projecting this to be a split backfield at the same time. Now, of course, CMC still easily the running back 1 based off what he can do as a receiver, based on his overall upside. But he does have those 2 red flags that 1, the workload's not going to be what it once was. And 2, he's older than he's ever been. So that's why I'm still going to have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase ahead of him in our overall rankings. Now, going over to the number 1 running back in fantasy last year, Austin Ekeler. Clearly, he has an elite level ceiling as well. I mean, back-to-back finishes as a top 3 back, but similar to CMC, he also has red flags. Austin Ekeler was drafted in 2017, so now he's going to be going into year 6, year 7 with Austin Ekeler as a running back that also I expect to see the target share in this offense go down. The reason being is if you are looking at the boosted involvement Ekeler had this past year, going from 5.9 targets per game to 7.5, I think this was fueled based off the Los Angeles Chargers having to kind of go in his direction as the top receiver at times. Because you had Mike Williams missing 4 games this past year. You had Keenan Allen missing 7 games, and the involvement with Ekeler in this receiving offense had a night and day difference in those contests. If you were looking at games with Mike Williams, Austin Ekeler averaged 6.5 targets per game. Games without Mike Williams, Austin Ekeler averaged 10.5 targets per game. If we're going to do the same thing with Keenan Allen, in games with Keenan Allen, Austin Ekeler averaged 6.2 targets per game. And in games without Keenan Allen, he was at 9.3. So I'm expecting, especially with the addition of Quentin Johnston into this offense, the targets to go back down from being about 7.5 per game this past year to about 5.96 targets per game like we saw in 2021. That's a red flag, plus his age, but come on, the man was the running back 1 last year. Even if he declines a bit, it's still going to be great. Now, going over to our next guy, we're looking at Bijan Robinson. Now, I have to be 100% upfront with you. I am very biased with Bijan Robinson. 1, I graduated from the University of Texas. 2, I got to interview Bijan Robinson at the NFL draft. And 3, I ran into Bijan Robinson at the gym a couple days ago. Okay, this is a running back that I'm rooting for more than anybody else this next season. So maybe that's why I have him this high. Or maybe it's just that he is a phenomenal prospect stepping into a great situation. I mean, Bijan Robinson since the year 2017 actually only comps to 2 running backs in our running back prospect model in terms of his score or higher. Those guys being Leonard Fournette as well as Saquon Barkley. Bijan Robinson had about 300 total opportunities his final year at Texas. Bijan Robinson went top 10 in the NFL draft. Bijan Robinson is a running back that does not just get involved as a pass catcher with dump offs when the pocket's collapsing. No, he runs real routes. He operates downfield. You see that by his 19 receptions, leading to over 300 receiving yards this past year. He was averaging 16.5 yards per reception. He's a great receiver. I kind of view Bijan Robinson as a slightly less athletic, a slightly slower rookie season Saquon Barkley. And that's not a slight. Saquon Barkley, the best prospect that's ever come into the NFL at the running back position. But regardless, I'm all in with Bijan because this offense is going to try to lead the NFL in rushing attempts this next year. Now, Saquon Barkley will be our next guy. Saquon Barkley is a running back that I cannot stop drafting in the middle round 2 of underdog drafts right now. I understand a lot of people are worried about a holdout. I am not an NFL agent. I can't sit here and say I know exactly what's going on, but what I do know is Saquon Barkley is highly incentivized to play this next year under a new contract, and the New York Giants are highly incentivized to have Saquon Barkley coming back, given the fact that they are playing for a title this season. So I think both sides are going to work this out. Barkley was the running back 5 from a points per game perspective a year ago. He averaged over 100 total yards per game. You may actually see the touchdowns go up for Saquon Barkley this next year. And I think it's in the range of outcomes for Barkley to be the running back 1 overall. One thing that's very encouraging with this contract situation is if you go over to Underdog right now, they still have the player prop up for Saquon Barkley at 7.5 rushing touchdowns and 975.5 rushing yards. I would assume if Barkley was really going to hold out this season, or if that was a real threat, Underdog would probably have to take that line down. But of course, real quick, if you want to go check out any of those player props on Underdog Fantasy, or if you want to get in a draft with us, which we are doing every single day, it's best ball, so no time commitment at all during the year. That's how I drafted 700 teams and won $150,000 last season. Now is the best time to go over and hop on Underdog because they have a free Patrick Mahomes bet out there until July 22nd. They also have the Puppy Tournament open, which is a $5 buy-in, $500,000 prize pool, $75,000 for first, which Nick, a member of the flock last year, won. You can find that link in the description of this video in the comment section. And if you sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, as well as a free trial to flockfantasy.com. But now going over to our next running back in this tier, I'm going to have Jonathan Taylor. I can't stop drafting him round 2 either. Going to be super brief with this. I understand, yes, he was injured last year. I understand the Colts were very bad last season. I know that Anthony Richardson by no means is guaranteed to be a good rookie this upcoming year. But nonetheless, if you were looking at the risk versus upside reward for Jonathan Taylor, I like taking that bet. He actually increased his market share numbers both as a rusher and a receiver this past year in Indianapolis. He's one of the true 3-down bell cow running backs that's still on their rookie deal. Now, our next guy will be Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, super safe option. And if you are playing in a non-PPR format, you should move Nick Chubb ahead of Jonathan Taylor, and you should move Nick Chubb ahead of Saquon Barkley. Just specifically for a full PPR league, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to do so, as I think those other running backs have a higher ceiling as pass catchers. But with Nick Chubb, you may actually see the increased involvement as a pass catcher this next year, as Nick Chubb, since 2019, has averaged about 2 targets per game in games with Kareem Hunt, and about 3 targets per game in games without Kareem Hunt. So just because Chubb hasn't been a great pass catcher as of late doesn't mean that can't change with the departure of Hunt. We just haven't seen it yet, and we have seen it with Barkley and Taylor, but they are going to be in the same tier for us. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Tony Pollard here, running back 9 in fantasy this past year, and now you have no Ezekiel Elliott. The man was hyper efficient with only 12 carries per game, with only 3.5 targets per game. The man averaged 86 total yards per game. If you look at the involvement for Pollard in this offense over the past 4 years, it has only gone up while Ezekiel Elliott has only gone down. This is the moment that pretty much everybody has been waiting for with Tony Pollard with the departure of Ezekiel Elliott. But I will admit I am a little hesitant for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm just scared and I shouldn't have to be. I think there's a small chance that the Dallas Cowboys look to bring in Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook. But if you go over to the player props right now on Underdog, hell, Underdog has Pollard for 10.5 total touchdowns for over 1,000 rushing yards. Like, they have Pollard for more rushing yards than Saquon Barkley. Now, going over to our next back, he is going to jump a tier higher for us. Derrick Henry is looking a little more exciting with DeAndre Hopkins over there in Tennessee. The reason being is the 2 major red flags that you have with Derrick Henry Really, now you only have 1.5. The two red flags were his age, which should be a real concern. He's pushing 30 at this point. And on top of this, you had a horrendous projection for the Tennessee Titans offense. Hopefully Hopkins makes this offense better. They pick up more first downs. They extend drives. They have more trips to the red zone and more touchdown opportunities for Derrick Henry overall. But one thing I do want to point out is if you're going to go ahead and look at running backs the age of Derrick Henry historically and look at what they've done going into this next year, you had Arian Foster back in 2014, LaShawn McCoy 2016, Curtis Martin 2001, Marshawn Lynch 2014, DeMarco Murray 2016. What you ended up seeing with pretty much all of these players is they all got worse going into their following season. You saw them go from 21 points per game down to 19. From 20 points per game down to 16, from 19 points per game down to 15, from 19 points per game down to 12, from 18 points per game down to 11. We know that age has to be a real concern with these backs. You can still draft Henry. Just make sure you're doing so after the guys like Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. Now, going over to our next tier, we're going to have Josh Jacobs, my most drafted running back on Underdog last year. Hell, my most drafted player. He was a big reason we won $150,000 last year. But nonetheless, coming off a running back 3 finish, I would be a little more concerned about the holdout potential of Josh Jacobs this next year because the Raiders really aren't playing for something right, whereas the Giants are. Now, our next guy, we're going to have Rameses Stevenson. On paper, very similar to Pollard. Rameses Stevenson looks like a league winner based off of his involvement as a receiver last year with over 5 targets per game and now the departure of Damien Harris. But very similar to Tony Pollard. For whatever reason, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous they're bringing in Dalvin. I'm a little nervous they're bringing in Zeke. They're bringing in Fournette. They're bringing in Hunt. But if Rameses Stevenson gets to September and we haven't seen any other running backs get added to this New England Patriots depth chart, then at that point, I will be moving Rameses Stevenson over Josh Jacobs and honestly, probably in the same tier as Derrick Henry in full PPR formats. Now, our next guy will be Breece Hall. Breece Hall, super limited sample with what we got to see last year. He was the running back 8 from a points per game perspective. And you would assume that with the massive quarterback upgrade and how this offense should be dramatically better with Aaron Rodgers coming over, that we should probably rank the running back going into year 2 higher than running back 8 where he finished last year. But it's just almost impossible to do that, right? I mean, if you are looking at Breece Hall, it's coming off the torn ACL. We've seen this time and time again. I mean, go back and look at what you had with J.K. Dobbins a year ago. You have to put a discount on those running backs coming back off a torn ACL. I believe we are giving Breece Hall an appropriate discount here because, to be completely honest with you, if Breece Hall was able to finish his rookie season last year, then were to get the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets this offseason, and if he were 100% healthy, I would have probably had Breece Hall not as the running back 11. Instead, I probably would have had Breece Hall as the running back 4 or 5. Now, going over to our next tier, we're going to be looking at Naji Harris at 12. With Naji Harris, the 2-year comps don't look great, right? So what we did is we went over to the RotoViz screener. We put in his rookie season statistics with about a 10 to 20% window in both his rushing yards as well as his receiving yardage. And we did the same thing with his second season. So we get to see all rookies since the year 2000 at the running back position that actually had a strong rookie season followed by a much worse sophomore year. And the guys that popped back since the year 2000 were James Robinson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So there are very real concerns here with Naji Harris. And that's why you're going to hear a lot of people tell you that you cannot draft Naji. Now, obviously, everything comes down to price. And I'll look at Naji Harris and I'll maybe take the other side of this. Because I can say, well, Naji Harris now has a better offensive line this upcoming year than he did a year ago. Naji Harris now has a second-year quarterback in comparison to Mitchell Trubisky and a rookie-year quarterback. And Naji Harris now is presumably fully healthy, where we know he was not last season. So I think there are a ton of reasons to assume that Naji Harris bounces back here, but the historical data shows us that you should be concerned. Just understand the range of outcomes when you're looking at Naji. Now, going over to our next guy, Travis Etienne. This is a running back that I am excited about while everybody else is scared. Everybody is scared that, yeah, Tank Bigsby coming over. And yes, with Tank Bigsby, I will admit, he will have a role. I don't think Travis Etienne's going to turn into 2019 Christian McCaffrey. I don't think Travis Etienne's going to turn into prime Ezekiel Elliott. No, Travis Etienne's going to be a running back instead, seeing about 65 to 70% of the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. And I think that is an extremely valuable skill set. I think that is an extremely valuable role in an offense that should be much better with Trevor Lawrence this next year. Now, I will say with Etienne, the one thing that I have to see improvement for, and I need to see this improvement, is going to be the receiving down skill set, the receiving usage. This past year, he averaged only 2.5 targets per game with a target share of about 7.5% on a per game basis. This was significantly worse than expected. You go back to his time at Clemson, the man was averaging 4 targets per game. So I think you could see a couple different comps for Travis Etienne through history. We went and looked at all second-year running backs with a similar season of Travis Etienne since the year 2000. And the two main guys that you're going to see stand out will be Jamal Charles as well as Rashard Mendenhall. Now, I think Etienne actually comps a little bit more to Mendenhall. I think that makes a lot of sense. But the primary difference between Charles and Mendenhall is how their involvement as a pass catcher changed over the years. Jamal Charles went from averaging 19.8 receiving yards per game as a sophomore to about 30 yards per game the following season, where Mendenhall went in the opposite direction. He went from about 17.5 yards per game as a receiver down to about 10.5 in year 3. So that's going to be the main thing to look for with Travis Etienne. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to have Joe Mixon higher now than we once did. If you are looking at Joe Mixon, this is a running back that I wish I would have drafted more of on Underdog over the past few months. Like back whenever drafts first launched on Underdog in April, I was all about Mixon because hell, he was going round 7. He was going round 6. And at that price point, it made so much sense. But as he rose up to being a running back going at the end of the 4th, the beginning of the 5th, I sadly stopped taking Joe Mixon because I thought that there was still the concern that they hadn't figured out the contract situation and that it wasn't restructured. And then at that point, I started taking Jamir Gibbs. I started taking Kenneth Walker consistently over Joe Mixon, which hindsight being 2020 was a massive mistake because now you have the Cincinnati Bengals fixing this issue with Joe Mixon, getting that contract restructured, guaranteeing Mixon is a Bengal this next year. Is a running back that over the past 3 seasons has averaged the running back 8 finish. I mean, hell, he had almost a 15% team target share a year ago, and you have Samaje Perine no longer with the Cincinnati Bengals. Mixon looks like he could easily be a league winner, and honestly, I kind of want to move him higher than this. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to look at Jamir Gibbs. If you're playing in a non-PPR format, you will need to move Gibbs down. The reason we're going to rank Gibbs here is these are rankings for a full PPR league. And with Jamir Gibbs, this is a running back that should be a phenomenal receiving down back and an offense that should probably be pretty good this next year. Has a great offensive line. And most importantly, if you're looking at Jared Goff has always targeted the running back position. The simple reason being is Jared Goff has no mobility. Jared Goff can't be Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Daniel Jones, Justin Fields. When the pocket collapses, you can't see anything but a dump off from Goff. He's not running to pick up the first down. So I think the skill set of Gibbs aligns naturally with the playing style that Jared Goff has. It's a great offensive line, but it's specifically for a full PPR league. Now, Kenneth Walker is our next guy, running back 16. Now, it's kind of funny, right? Is if you look at Kenneth Walker after the first month of the season last year, the only running backs to average more points per game include Austin Ekeler, Christian McCaffrey, Jacobs, Henry, Pollard, Connor, Mixon, Barkley, Ramadre. So he's the running back 9 at that point. And yes, I'm projecting Kenneth Walker to sadly go down, but you can't really ignore what this team did this offseason. They go through and they take Zach Charbonnet in round 2, indicating that they want more help at the running back position. And if you go back to what we saw with Kenneth Walker in his time in college, Walker really wasn't a pass catcher. And Zach Charbonnet was. I think what you're going to end up seeing is Zach Charbonnet as the receiving down back here for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, our next guy will be Aaron Jones. With Aaron Jones, the offense should be worse given the fact that you have Aaron Rodgers leaving. And on top of this, Aaron Jones is extremely old. Aaron Jones stayed all 4 years at UTEP, was in the same 2017 draft class as a lot of these other backs. And if we go through and look at what you've seen from Aaron Jones prototypes historically at this age going into the next year. You had Jamal Charles as really the only running back getting better. Jamal Charles went from 19 points per game to 21 from 2014 to 2015, but very rarely you're going to see that, where almost every other running back got worse. You had Jamal Anderson staying about the same, but then you had Steven Jackson going from 15 points per game down to 12.5. You had Larry Johnson going from 16 down to 12. You had Fred Jackson going from 13 down to 11. You had Chester Taylor going from 13 to 10. You had Joique Bell going from 13.5 to 8. You had Chris Johnson going from 15 to 7. You had Darren McFadden going from 12.5 to 4.5. You had Raheem Mostert going from about 13 to 2. Yeah, so I am a little bit concerned here with Aaron Jones, not really drafting him. Miles Sanders, the situation's very unique, right? I mean, it looks like he is the unquestioned 3-down back there for the Carolina Panthers. I mean, they go out there and they give Miles Sanders $11 million guaranteed in a running back market where literally nobody wants to pay the running back position. But with that being said, what you can see with Miles Sanders is the fact that his involvement as a pass catcher has just gone straight downhill over the past 3 years. Now, a reason for that may end up just being that Jalen Hurts, obviously a quarterback that can run the ball himself, isn't really incentivized to ever go through and dump the ball off, because if the pocket collapses, Jalen Hurts can just go out there and run the ball himself. But yeah, I don't know on that front. Damien Pierce, our next guy. Love drafting Damien Pierce with where he goes. I mean, right now, if you're looking at underdog drafts, you're getting Damien Pierce in round 6. You're getting Damien Pierce sometimes in round 7. I've talked about him time and time again, so I don't want to bore you. He was a running back I didn't draft last year because the situation looked like crap. He was an unproven day 3 player, and he was going in round 4. He crushed it as a rookie. The Houston Texans bring in Singletary as a backup running back. They get a quarterback upgrade with CJ Stroud, and now he's cheaper than he was last year. I don't get it. It makes 0 sense, and I will be drafting Damien Pierce. And J.K. Dobbins never has finished that high in fantasy, right? Dobbins running back 33 as a rookie. Dobbins running back 34 this past season. But at the same time, you can make an argument, well, Mason, J.K. Dobbins just wasn't fully good to go. Mason, J.K. Dobbins just needed a little bit more time. Well, now he's had that time coming off the torn Achilles. At the same time, if you are looking at J.K. Dobbins, this is a running back that should be playing in an offense that has a ton of trips to the red zone, hopefully touchdown upside. Obviously, we don't know exactly how the scheme is going to be with the offensive coordinator change, but I still think they're going to run the ball a decent amount. But I think that's all we have for you. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. And of course, if you want to go check out any of those player props, or if you want to get into a draft with us on the live stream, which we're doing every single day until 2024, now is the best time to do so. The puppy is live on Underdog. $5 buy-in, $500,000 prize pool, $75,000 for first place, which a member of the flock, Nick, won last season. And also, they have the Patrick Mahomes free line up, I believe, until July 22nd. So please make sure you take advantage of that before it's too late. You can find that link in the comment section as well as the description. If you sign up to Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings and a free trial to flockfantasy.com. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you in the live stream later tonight.